What's up, everybody? Joe Brown here. This is the Heresy Financial Show, and one of the most common questions I get is, what should be done? We see all these massive, colossal errors that policymakers are making, whether it's Powell at the Federal Reserve yelling at the Treasury, whether it's whoever's in the White House at any given time or whoever's in Congress. We see massive mistakes being made, the same mistakes being made over and over and over again, and we think, hey, look, as long as we could do the right things, and as long as we could get somebody in there who makes the right decisions, things would be okay moving forward. And I'm here to tell you that's actually not the case. It's easy to point fingers and say, hey, they did something wrong, and that's why we're experiencing these things. And that might be true, but nobody wants to admit to the fact that there are some things baked into the cake already. And even if, from this moment forward, every decision that we make as a nation is the right one, we will still have massive pain ahead. Ready? Let's dive in. I don't know where I heard this, but somebody once said, it's not your fault if you came from a broken family, but it is your responsibility that a broken family doesn't come from you. That highlights very clearly to me the difference between fault and responsibility. Here's an economic example of this. It was not Nixon's fault that the Federal Reserve had no gold. It was not Nixon's fault that for decades the United States had printed more dollars and then spent them overseas compared to the amount of gold we had to back up those dollars. And at that time, every dollar said this is redeemable on demand for gold. So all these countries believed us that we would keep our word. And if they wanted to get their gold, they could. It was not Nixon's fault that for decades, every single policymaker and every decision maker had made decisions to push that a little bit further, a little bit further. It's his responsibility, however, to deal with it. Did he deal with it the right way? Absolutely not. He could have, but he didn't. In the same way, many people look around right now at everything that is happening. Inflation through the roof, wages not keeping up, everybody's hurting, savings rates are plummeting, debt rates are skyrocketing to all-time highs. They're looking around and saying, hey, there's economic pain everywhere we look, and it's his fault, it's her fault, it's their fault. And that's true. Much of the economic pain that many people are experiencing today are not entirely their faults. However, that doesn't mean it's not your responsibility to do something about it. So this comes in two forms. Number one, it comes personal, right? Just because the system is going one way doesn't mean you have to live that way. Just because everybody else lives on a fiat standard doesn't mean you can't live on a sound money standard. You can save in gold, you can save in Bitcoin, you can save in silver, you can lend in gold and silver and Bitcoin. You can operate in a sound money world with your savings. You can operate in a fiat money world by shorting fiat, by borrowing in fiat, that's shorting what goes down. You can live in both worlds. You can have sound economic practices. You can monitor your expenses and your income and make sure you're living within your means. You can expand your skill set and expand your means. You can do all these things regardless of what the rest of the world does. So just because the rest of the world is maybe geared against you doesn't matter. You can still live in a way to get ahead. That's number one. But number two, from a societal standpoint, many people think if we just got the right person in office, if we just got the right people in positions of power, they could make the right decisions and we wouldn't have to go through this economic pain. That's not the case. This is baked into the cake already. Every levering up is followed by a deleveraging. Sometimes that looks inflationary, where the deleveraging is inflationary, so that debt is printed away, but it's still a deleveraging. Sometimes that deleveraging is deflationary, like the Great Depression, where prices collapse, but it's still a deleveraging. In both cases, whether you look at examples of hyperinflation or whether you look at examples of extreme deflation, the same thing is happening on a real day-to-day basis. People still can't get enough food. People can't get enough clothes, can't get enough shelter, can't get enough wages. People can't get the stuff that they need. We had a levering up too much so, and a deleveraging that's following. The reality of this is that all leverage is borrowing purchasing power from the future. And there is no way around that. That means that that purchasing power that exists in the future is spent already. This is true of individuals. This is true of systems, entire economies. There's no way around it. That means if we leverage up too much in the present, that means we spent more and more and more of the future's purchasing power. And if one thing has happened for the last few decades around here is too much leveraging up. That means that that purchasing power came from the future. It's already been spent. That means that purchasing power is gone from the future. It's not there anymore. It's been pulled into the present and spent. That means no matter what we do, we are facing a future with less resources than we could have otherwise, less capital than we could have otherwise, less spending power than we could have otherwise. The pain and suffering ahead will happen regardless. So, what can we do about it? Should we just throw our hands up and not make the right decisions? Absolutely not. We have a responsibility. It's not our fault, but we have a responsibility to deal with it in the right way, to bear that burden on our shoulders, march forward with purpose, take the right actions, do the best with what we can. And if we do that, both individually and as an entire nation and as an entire world, we will be much better off on the other side. If instead we continue the mistakes of those who have gone before us, and we continue to borrow more purchasing power from the future, and we continue to play this game, we will get to the end of the road and a point at which we realize there's nothing left to keep on going forward, and a collapse will happen like has happened many times before, where there is no rebuilding. There is no coming back. There's no more Roman Empire today. There's no more Greek Empire today. There's no more Egyptian Empire today. It is very possible for societies to get to the end of the road and realize we spent everything there was. It's done. It's over. So we do have a choice to bear the pain and suffering and responsibility with purpose and say, this is the end of the road. The buck stops here and we are going to rebuild better on the other side and do it the right way. Or we can continue down this path and realize it can actually all go away. And for me and my family and those around me, I'm doing everything I can to say, I'm not going that way. Regardless of what everybody else chooses to do, I'm bearing the responsibility, and it might not be fair, not be my fault. I don't care. I'm going to do the right thing, and myself and everybody around me will be much better off as a result, and I hope as many of you can follow along and do that as well, because the more of us that do that, the better off we will all be long term. As always, really appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day.